Jacob Cordero here, CookwareJunkies.com, and we're going to be reviewing the Copper Chef electric skillet, which is going to be one of your most popular, top-selling electric skillets. So what we really want to do is kind of, obviously right now we're going to unbox it, but then we're going to put it to the test to see if really, if the Copper Chef is one of those things where, you know, they're just a top seller because they spend a lot of ad money. All right, so the thermostat meat trigger thermometer deal here looks actually a little more solid than I had expected. Imagine it's just like a breakaway deal. It goes up by 50-degree increments, more or less. All right, and then so let's see what we got here. We got our lid, and usually Copper Chef likes to give you a bunch of recipes and stuff with their stuff. So there's probably a recipe book. There is, and instructions. The lid is very, if you're used to the Copper Chef product line, the lid is very similar to that design, so you'll be familiar with it. Pan, again, pretty much looks like your standard deal on that. So it is something that does stand alone. In other words, you can put this right over your burner, or you can use it obviously on the portable deal here. So that's pretty much it. So this plate just kind of sits on there. I guess it's just like a free sitting deal. So we'll be testing the quality and kind of how well this heat evenly gets distributed across this plate here. So it's an interesting looking plate in that the traditional skillets will have like a ring for heat where it'll heat up. This one looks like it might be a little bit more evenly distributed, but we will be putting that to the test, and we'll be giving you the results over the next 4 or 5 cuts here. We're going to run about 3 or 4 tests, and then we'll be back with a final take. We're back from our test, which we basically took a little bit of butter, threw in some vegetables, did an everyday saute on the vegetables, and of the 6 that we tried out and tested, the Copper Chef pretty much finished dead last behind the one that was broken, essentially. So when it comes to sauteing, the Copper Chef is not very conducive to getting a nice caramelized saute well, where basically this non-stick surface just really didn't allow us to get any of that. So the veggies actually never completed. We ended up just giving up on it because after, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, so the last place one had completed. This one was still going, and there was, the onions were still white, the peppers were still basically looked like they had just been chopped and thrown in there.
The loser, unfortunately, was Copper Chef, which never made it up to temperature. We set it to 325, it never made it over about 270. We cranked it up until it finally got up to about 315. It took about 10 minutes to get a really unsatisfactory first cook, then we cranked it up to max. It never made it past about 325, which led to greasy, chewy, disgusting fries. So the Copper Chef is not recommended at this point, but we'll see how it fares as we continue to our next tests.
This test is just basically going to be about the sear. We want to see how well we can get a sear on a steak. So we're not really concerned necessarily of how well it cooks it all the way through, but really on that outer crust area, how well it's searing on each side. Copper Chef actually got a really nice crust on the outside right at the beginning. We flipped it over after 3 minutes, and we're trying to get it up to about 130 or so before we pull it, and it's slowly getting its way there. So it's taken about a little more than twice as long as the Zojirushi did to sear and also to complete. Right back from the sear test, and to do the sear test, what we did is we heated these bad boys up to their maximum temperature. Copper Chef's actual maximum temperature says it's 425, so we went ahead and kicked it up to the 425. And then took a top sirloin, dropped it in there after about 12 minutes, and then let it sit for 3 minutes to get that nice sear. So when we flipped it over, that was kind of our judge as how well this did as far as searing goes. And it did fine enough. The crust was pretty good, and probably out of the 5 that we tested out, as far as the kettles that we were testing it out on, this was probably finished second or third as far as the quality of that crust. Testing out pancakes because it's one of the most common cooked items in the skillets. So we'll be just seeing which one, browns the best, which one maybe doesn't stick as much. So we'll be back with some results on that as well. So right now we're still testing temperature, see how accurate we're getting our readings here. And then once we're done with that, we'll be putting some batter in here for the pancakes.
We're back from the pancake test on the Copper Chef skillet. It did not produce a great pancake in our usual test protocol. We set it to 300, same as the other skillets, and produced a pancake that never got much past blonde. It cooked for the longest amount of time, but still wound up a little bit doughy and not especially tasty. One issue we've had with the Copper Chef is that it runs at a lower temperature than the other skillets, so to compensate, we cranked it up to maximum and tried another pancake. That pancake was as good as any of the top tier. It had a nice brown crust and a tasty interior. We got that by cranking it up to maximum at 425. If you purchased the Copper Chef, you could compensate that way and use maximum temperature to get a good pancake, but you lose out on some of the higher end cooking. This time we're going to test the low temperature performance. To do that, we're going to poach some tilapia in milk. We've got seasoned milk and some onions. First we're going to bring it up to a simmer, and then we'll turn it down to the lowest setting and see how well it can maintain a low poach. We'll be testing the temperature throughout and see how well they maintain the temperature so that we get perfectly poached fish. The goal is that you'll be able to set it and forget it, prepare some perfectly poached fish while preparing side dishes and not have to worry that you're overcooking it. We just put it through its paces on the fish poaching test, and it did a good job. The Copper Chef had a little bit wider temperature range than we were hoping for, but it was able to hold a reasonable 140 and produce a nice piece of fish. The higher temperature range meant that we had to pull it a little sooner than I'd like to have, but ultimately it did a good job here.
How much over?
Now, one issue with the Zojirushi and the Copper Chef is that they run at a lower temperature for any given thermostat setting. So we set all of these to 300 degrees. The actual temperatures varied between 360 degrees and 415 degrees. So part of what we're looking at here is just a question of lower temperature producing worse results. The upside is, if you purchase the Copper Chef or the Zojirushi, you can get a good pancake by turning it up to max. The downside is your maximum temperature is much lower than the other models. For heat, it was relatively consistent side to side as well. It was about 15-20 degrees different center to side. Its thermostat was more accurate than most. It's about 50 degrees hot most of the time, which is about average, maybe a little bit good. All right, and we're wrapping up our final reviews here with our look at the Copper Chef electric skillet. This one, well, it's not very good. We fired it up for the sauteed vegetables. It never got that hot. It never sauteed them that well. We got basically no browning, and we got a big pile of limp nothing. For frying, it was equally bad. It took everything we had to get it up to temperature, and we wound up with limp, greasy fries without hardly any browning. When it came to searing the steak, well, it got a relatively good sear when it was turned up to maximum, but it took forever, and then it took forever to finish, which led to some problems in the ultimate texture of the steak. For pancakes, once again, no browning. They came out golden at the most, and because the pan is so small, you're only cooking basically 2 pancakes at a time. Fish poaching, it redeemed itself a little bit. It was able to hold a reasonable 140 and did a good job at cooking the fish. Its warm setting actually works. Ergonomically, we got some problems. First off, the cooking surface is extremely small. You're cooking 1 or 2 things tops. On the plus side, it washes extremely easily. It just rinses off but then we run into some problems with the way it's actually laid out. The handles are very good, and the pot itself can be used just directly on the stovetop, but it just sits loosely on this base, and a couple of times in cooking, we bumped it and it nearly fell off. A kid running around, it could be disastrous. Also, the handles are only present on the pan itself, and the heating element here gets very hot and just flat out can't be moved. You use this table side, it is not going anywhere until it is cooled off. The thermostat is a little bit vague and has the shortest cord of any of the ones we're using. Ultimately, the Copper Chef's only virtue is ease of cleaning, and it's not that much better than the other ones in the test. I cannot recommend the Copper Chef.